The tragedy of Life Esidimeni was reanimated today in the North Gauteng High Court when former Health MEC Qedani Mahlangu gave testimony at the inquest intended to determine if anyone should be held criminally liable for the deaths of 144 mental health patients. She has already told the hearing that even before her reappointment in 2014, the department's finances were in the doldrums and a decision already made to terminate the Life Esidimeni contract. She had previously served a brief stint in that same position. Let's talk about this now with Life Esidimeni Family Committee member Christine Nxumalo and DA Gauteng Shadow Health MEC Jack Bloom. Good evening to the both of you. One of the standout things that Mahlangu shared today were her recollections of how she had resisted the job. She shared that she felt that it wasn't fair being tipped for the post with a mandate to resolve the department's parlous finances. And she said that she knew she was going straight into the lion's den. Jack, what are you making of how she's likely to premise her account and defence against culpability or negligence in this matter?
Well, I remembered quite differently that she was extremely arrogant the whole time, and we see a different demeanour now. I think she's trying to get people to pity her, and she keeps distancing herself from who actually ordered the termination of the contract and who was blind and deaf to what the consequences were very likely to be. So I'm not impressed, to be honest. She needs to take full accountability for what happened because she was the driving force behind it. And now she tries to get sympathy about what a terrible job it was. Well, you're in politics. You have to deal with it. And she dealt with it terribly. And in fact, the most vulnerable people suffered because of her actions.
And speaking of vulnerable people, Christine, when you heard that the coffers were almost empty, forcing the decision to move the contract, leading loved ones, like your own loved ones, to go to ill-equipped NGOs, and Mahlangu defending herself against being the one who made that decision, what did you think?
Good evening, and thanks for having me. Actually, to be honest with you, I have to agree with Mr. Bloom that to now want to be seen to have tried is a different story versus at the time when all we did was plead and ask for, for them to reconsider. It wasn't the tone that we received back then. So unfortunately, it doesn't really mean much for us at this point.
If we look at what we've heard in this matter so far, and it's interesting that both of you are noting a change in her demeanour and a change in her defence on her conduct in this matter. Earlier, the former head of Mental Health Services, Dr. Magabo Manamela, pointed the finger at Mahlangu, saying it was her who made the call and that it was unprocedural. Given the accusations and the counterclaims, Jack, how do you see the anatomy of this tragedy factually picked apart so that we can see clearly how things unfolded?
Well, Qedani Mahlangu was the first day of her testimony today. I hope that there's going to be a proper cross-examination. She seems to be trying to implicate everyone except herself, but she was the MEC. The buck stops with her. And in fact, the evidence we've heard from staff officials is that they were terrified of her and that she was driving this. And we had earlier evidence during the Moseneke Commission from Barbara Creasy, I recall, who was the finance MEC, and she said no, there wasn't any specific pressure to cancel the Life Esidimeni contract. That initiative really came from Qedani Mahlangu. Now she's trying to blame everybody else. What she did say today is that it was a decision of the Budget Committee, and she said the Premier was implicated in that. Well, I think that the Premier should also be called to this commission because I do think he's implicated as well. But the prime mover undoubtedly was Qedani Mahlangu, and I think she should just be honest about it. And I hope that there's a proper cross-examination of her in the days ahead.
A quick one on this. Jack, her legal fees are estimated at over 250,000 Rand a day. Is it right that since she's giving account of her actions while in office that she is entitled to paid legal representation?
No, it's absolutely disgusting. And the DA has written to the Minister of Justice questioning this. Why should we be paying R250,000 a day for her legal fees for something that she was primarily responsible for? So I hope that that we're successful and we get this the legal fees issue withdrawn, and she should pay her own legal fees like everybody else. I just think it's outrageous. It seems to me that she still has friends in high places, and the taxpayer is paying for this now.
You know, Christine, I remember interviewing you in the early days of this tragedy when families were really sitting with the initial shock, the trauma and the pain of what had happened. You know, years go by and some of the edge of that becomes a little bit blunted and people forget just how horrific it was. When you go through this process today and you listen, what are you feeling and what are you hearing from your members about their feelings after today?
You know what? I literally a few minutes ago spoke to Jabulile Tlatswaya, who is struggling with her health. She listened briefly this morning to Qedani's testimony, and literally had to be rushed to hospital because her blood pressure was just spiking. And this is generally the feeling for most of the families. That, you know, and everybody has been waiting for her to testify. So the postponement didn't really do us any good either. So the anger is there. And I think the realization of what really just happens has literally just been postponed. And hearing her talk and listening to her almost crying, if that's what it was. But to be honest with you, the anger is still it's palpable. It's there. I can't even begin to explain it to you.
Christine, thank you very much. And thank you for sharing just the heartbreaking stories behind the scenes. And some of those, you know, we will not be able to see as this inquest continues. But there are strong hopes tonight for the truth of what exactly happened and for accountability to be subscribed in the Life Esidimeni tragedy. Life Esidimeni family committee member there, Christine Nxumalo, and DA Gauteng Shadow Health MEC, Jack Bloom.